The Street Fighter V community is becoming more and more wary of Luke as we explore the definitive update. Tweets and tier lists alike show that the character is probably more powerful than people are hoping for. Today we're trying to get an idea of whether or not Luke's top tier abilities will throw a wet blanket on Street Fighter V's final season. All on today's episode of Talkin' Block. Oh man, we are 2 weeks into the new Street Fighter V definitive patch now. It's been exciting, but it feels like there might be a wet kind of blanket thrown over everything, and that's what I want to get into today. But of course, before doing that, I'd like to ask everybody to like this video, Psycho Crush that like button, give us a comment at the end. I want to know, before you hear what we talk about today, do you think that Luke is a problem top tier character, taking the fun out of the potential of Street Fighter V, or do you think it's just fine? Let us know in the comments before we talk about it, and then you can chime in afterwards too to let us know if you've changed your mind. But yeah,
we are
here
the
we
mind
are.
changers, John. We change people's perspectives of everything. I want to see if you're going to change my perspective of how I feel about Luke being top one. What is your case?
So it sounds like maybe you're not necessarily right there to begin with. I'll lay out a little bit of what we've been seeing, the kind of the sentiment that's flowing around right now. When Street Fighter gets, or any fighting game that's major gets patched, people usually have a wish list of things that they want to see happen, and that almost always revolves, at least in part, around the top tiers. Luke came out in November of last year. He was clearly a top tier, clearly designed to be, and then therefore was someone that everyone was looking to see. What are the nerfs? How is Capcom going to balance this character? And once this patch rolled out, they did hit him with a handful of nerfs, but they were kind of not significant in a lot of ways. His vitals got hit. That's a pretty big deal. So good. His low forward got hit, sure, but he also got a handful of buffs to help things out in other avenues. His new his V skill and V trigger 2 are much better now, and might be the new hotness for him. But then, like, his fireball got nerfed, but not in the way that you would hope. You know, not in the utility. It lost a little bit of damage and a little bit of block stun, I think it was, but it didn't lose how fast it comes out. And he really doesn't lose much of his utility there. His normals are amazing, and they remain pretty amazing. In fact, his crouching medium punch got buffed. And really what we're seeing is, while a lot of other top tiers did get nerfed, Luke kind of got slaps on the wrist and is still, matter of fact, the best in the game as far as a lot of early opinions by some pretty notable figures across the community. And now there's going to be a top tier. Sure, that's fine. But if you can identify that top tier right off the bat, and this ends up being accurate, then that's not a very good look. And furthermore, if you are having a really hard time facing the army of this top tier, which might end up being the case, that's another thing that people are afraid of. That's also not a good look for your game. So that's kind of where we're sitting right now, that maybe Capcom has designed Luke to be too good, and it will put a wet blanket on this final season of Street Fighter V. John, what do you think?
There's definitely merit to what you're saying, because I'm hearing that echoed by other players, and one of the biggest things I saw was that we didn't get enough offline events last year to really see Luke flourish there, and a lot of people compared him to, you know, Seth from a year or two ago, where everyone had a pocket Seth, right? And that was what we were hearing about Luke, that everyone had a pocket Luke, and you were going to see him busted out. But with how things broke down, that did not happen. I'm not as big on this character as some other people, because I really don't think that he just got a slap on the wrist. A damage reduction of 10 on your fireball is huge. Also, the decrease to pushback, and that is a buff I just got with Rose. It's a buff that Guile got a few seasons back that really helped him quite a bit too. I really don't agree with people saying it's a slap on the wrist. He's definitely worse, but what I think may have happened, though, is everyone else around him got nerfed, which clearly is the case, and now he's kind of risen up in there, and he just kind of like in a vacuum he definitely got worse, but in the aggregate with everyone factored in, it's definitely possible he got better.
Right, right. And I mean, a lot of characters got some really good stuff, and it seems like one of the objectives for Capcom this season is to make everyone as viable as possible. And like we've talked about in a previous video, how they want to make Street Fighter V maybe prioritized fun over competition. But the Capcom Pro Tour announcement also just happened, and we are returning to offline events this year. There's not a ton of information on those yet, but we do know it will be both off and online events. So there is this surge about competition that I dare say we haven't had in a few years, if that actually comes to fruition. Capcom has planned, an in-person Capcom Cup twice in a row and canceled it. But so you kind of, well, I want to say Javits, one of the most mad scientists of all the mad scientists when it comes to Street Fighter. He's a lab monster. He sees things that people don't see. He comes up with really cool combos and things like that, and he really picks characters apart and tries to understand them in ways that maybe not everybody else does. He tweeted out a few days ago that Luke was nerfed into top 1, and so you're kind of getting out there that, yeah, he did get a few nerfs, but in the aggregate, when it's all said and done, he's actually moved up a little bit. And so part of this is it's early and we don't know for sure yet because the experiment hasn't been run. Fair enough. But how your community is perceiving your game is still a huge part of all of this. That's your relationship there. And if you have people like Javits isn't the biggest, voice in the room, but he's someone. And then we've seen other even bigger voices saying negative things or at least being wary about Luke's potential already. You had Mena RD come out and say that this character is unbeatable. Mena's young and he's being a little dramatic there, but you have a Capcom Cup champion talking about this character in this way that's going to influence what people feel and think about. You have Snake Eyes saying, there's going to be so many Luke mirror matches in the CPT this year, and nobody bats an eye at that. We're like, yeah, that's probably going to be the case. We wouldn't be surprised if that's the case because, like you said, just like everybody had like all the pros had pocket Seths because he was so matter-of-fact good just in Season 4. That's Luke, but even to a higher degree, I would say, because I could probably point to a handful of things that advantages that Luke has even more so than the ones I could point to with Seth. And it's just beginning to feel, I gotta say, Daigo Umehara, heard of him, multi-time EVO champion and the most celebrated fighting game player in history, is saying things like, it feels as though we should all just play Luke. I'm excited for a handful of characters, but it looks like I'm going to just have to play Luke, and that's boring. The character is so matter-of-fact the best in the game is not a good look for Capcom.
Yeah, if that is the case, I would agree. And all these players we've seen, especially with Daigo, he's very much a prisoner of the moment, where you ask him one day how he feels about something and he gives you his opinion, and then the next day he might feel completely differently. And that's very much kind of how Daigo works and stuff. So I'm not convinced that Luke is matter-of-fact top 1. He's going to dominate the CPT because we have not seen it yet. In theoretical, Theory Fighter is something I played all, way back in the day on IRC and, the 1990s and stuff like that, because we didn't have online play. So we're like, well, my crouching medium kick will beat this and other stuff. And, hey, there's plenty of room for this. It's a big part of our show. We discuss this stuff. So I'm definitely intrigued by this, but I'm not fully on board with Luke as a matter-of-fact top 1 character, especially when, you want to talk about slaps on the wrist, you might talk about Cammy. She still might be the number 1 character in this game, and it's amazing. It's like I still swear, and I'm maybe Capcom will talk to me about this, but I really wonder if the CEO of Capcom is just this huge fan of Cammy. Like, what's going on there? But we're talking about Luke. We're not talking about Cammy in that context. You're going to have to prove to me that Luke is as good as people say he is before I'm going to believe it.
Mm-hmm. And yes, you're right. The experiment does need to be run. But like I said earlier, the overall perception of the community and then the way is going to affect the way that some other people engage with the game. And that brings me to, well, what is Capcom's overall objective with this character? We know they want attention on Luke. They want people to be familiar with the character. They want him to have momentum moving into Street Fighter 6, where he will be the protagonist. And likely he's fairly different in some significant ways than the rest of the cast. It's probably because that's closer to the way Street Fighter 6 will generally flow. And so it might be that they want to prioritize him because they're preparing us for 6. But at the same time, they do seem to have made Street Fighter V into this like last hurrah, let's have fun, let's have competition kind of a thing. And so to the extent that those two things might be clashing, I think that's an issue too. You know, we talk about how developers will roll out overpowered DLC to encourage people to play them. That's, you know, the kind of pay to win when it comes to things like fighting games. I don't say that that's necessarily what's going on here, but it does feel like that spirit is maybe what has captured Capcom, and not like it's a conscious decision that they might be making. But I'm saying like Capcom wants really strong Luke so that people play, or wants Luke to be really strong so that people play him more than they want to have fun. And like that's a bad sentiment. Like I'm sorry, they are more motivated to play him than they are to like explore the rest of the game. You know, like Daigo's like, well, if I'm going to approach this game competitively, I'm kind of obligated to play this top tier, matter of fact, best character in the game. And that takes away a little bit of the spirit out of the game. That takes away a little bit of the spontaneity and the fun. It's like, all right, and here's another, you know, Luke Mirror in top 8, and who's going to be at the right spacing to get the jab off at the right time or whatever. And it really simplifies down the game into Luke Fighter 5. And I'm not saying that's necessarily where we're going for sure, but there's a fear of that.
Yeah, there's a fear of it, and it's funny. It's like the devil you know, right? We saw a million Cammy mirrors, Urian mirrors, Rashid mirrors, and you know the community was not as up in arms about it because they knew about those characters and basically had overcome them to some degree, right? They had kind of felt like, all right, yeah, there are problems and we want them dealt with, but also like the fervor we're seeing for Luke right now is a little bit kind of like crazy. The fact it's coming with a DLC character and coming this late in the game's lifespan, it's a little bit interesting that people are as up in arms with them. But I personally like when DLC characters are strong. And when you have a DLC character that drops that is not good, that is usually one of the worst things that you could do in a video game, in a fighting game. And I really want to see Luke get up there and get him more explored, more, you know, it's people are saying, oh, matter of fact, number one, other stuff like, okay, well, let's see you win some tournaments with him and do this and do this stuff and see it, you know, and, you know, sure, maybe these players can do it, but like, I'm skeptical.
Well, we saw him roll out back in November, and immediately he won both Wednesday night fights and NLBC, and then won like the next 2 or 3 Wednesday night fights in a row, and then I stopped keeping track, but he came out to immediate success, and people like Chris CCH, who's produced a tier list in since the definitive update has come out. I think we've posted 3 tier lists: Chris CCH, Shutos, and Fudos. All 3 of them, 2 of them have Luke at the number 1 spot, and then I believe that Shutos has Luke in the God tier, nestled between Dalsum and M. Bison, and I don't know if those are ordered from left to right or not, but he is in the God tier with only 2 other characters. But we have seen him do well, competitively speaking. We have seen him be very popular online. He came out as the number 1 most popular character in the month after he was released, and then he dropped to 3rd and has maintained that spot at 3rd. Now, it's not uncommon to see a new character become the most popular for the month. That happens sometimes. But for them to stick around is a whole other story, and Luke seems to be sticking around, and I wouldn't be surprised if he climbs up. And by the way, he's eked out by Ryu and Ken, who are, you know, 2 of the most popular characters in the game, and Ken is getting a lot more attention now because he's gotten a lot better. But yeah, he's a character that has a lot of already good resume lines in terms of competition. And you're right. Let's see what happens in these first handful of tournaments and kind of maybe reconvene at that point and see if these worries are warranted. But I do think they will be because, well, here's an instance. Broski rolled out a video not too long ago called All Luke's Normals Are Absurd. And I was like, that's clickbait, Broski. But I'm intrigued. You got me with the clickbait. Let's check it out. It wasn't clickbait. He goes through virtually all of Luke's normals, you know, and they're very different from a lot of other characters because they're forward moving. I actually really like the way Luke works. It's just that I don't want that to be in a vacuum. I don't want Luke to be the only one that can do that with a cast of characters that relatively are not able to do so, and thus he's going to either float to the top or sink to the bottom pretty quickly, and in this case floating to the top because he's got these forward advancing normals. And so we don't have to go through all of them, but like, you know, that standing medium punch is one of the most confirmable moves in the entire game, and it leads to great damage, and you can cancel into V trigger if needs be. His the characters will have like a single normal that you'll notice is like, wow, that's really good. And usually it takes a little while for that to come out, as opposed to like some really good special move, because normals, they take a little bit of time to really figure out their place and their utility. But, you'll have like G's crouching jab. After a little while, we figured out G's crouching jab's actually really good, despite being, 4 frames and such, because of how far forward it reaches.
Yes.
And it becomes an incredibly important defensive tool for the character. And then nestled in with the rest of his really good offense, the fact that that becomes a bridge into his offense was an incredibly important thing that we didn't really know for a while until G was more explored. And like, oh man, this is actually a lot better, especially because of the context. Well, Luke's crouching jab goes very far forward, similar to G's, but is a frame faster. He's got the 3 frame, and that can confirm into target combos, into damage, into good situations for Luke. So his defensive check is really good. Oh, but by the way, he's got a DP, an invincible DP, the kind of thing that G doesn't have. He's got options beyond what G has, but he also has like the normal that G is kind of known for on defense, but in even better supply because it's a frame faster. And you can go through examples like that, like a standing medium kick. I don't know that his was like the best in the game or anything like that, but a good standing medium kick, remember the days of Evil Ryu in Street Fighter 4, Karen, especially when they raise a hurt box up so that you no longer are as susceptible to a crouching medium kick or a low poke. Luke's is so fast, and his front foot stays where it's at, so maybe he doesn't move the hurt box all that much. But it's a comparable to, like, you're going to talk about that move when you're talking about some of the best standing medium kicks in the game, and you're going to talk about his forward fierce when you're talking about some of the best forward fierces in the game, and you're going to talk about his standing light kick, which you can buffer into his EX upper kind of thing, and like the list goes on. I'm watching through Broski's video, and I'm like, dude, he does have like one of, if not the best of each of these normals, and they have very apparent utility, and they feed into the rest of his gameplay, and like almost none of those were really hit in this update. So he still has all those, and he can still do all this stuff. I am worried. I'm worried that Capcom goes in their objective to make Luke prominent and known and liked, that they're thinking, if Luke wins, then he is fun. And it's like, yeah, but that is short-term gain and long-term loss, because that gets stale quickly. Yes, it's fun to see your opponent's life bar empty. Yes, it's fun to see you win appear up on the screen. But if that's earned cheaply, then it's not a lasting thing, and then you end up going to do something else. And you better believe that those frustrated on the other side, in the spirit of what Mena RD was saying, this character is unbeatable, is incredibly frustrating, they're going to be way ready to leave or to not engage, or they're going to be at least kind of demotivated to, in a much taller order than like a Luke who's just winning too much,
Yeah, one of the things I think Capcom will address if Luke is as dominant as people fear is I'm basically positive they'll put out another patch that gets him. And it's probably going to happen mid-season, summertime, or maybe the fall time. There's no way that if Luke is running rapid that Capcom lets him do that okay, I shouldn't say there's no way, but I think it's unlikely, because you never know, because, hey, how long was Cammy dominant for? And even still might be dominant now. Again, I'm still wondering if like, people are like, oh yeah, Cammy's not, Cammy.
This is secretly a segment about Cammy, guys. You're right. You're right.
But no, I mean, let me actually ask you this. Do you think that there's a reality here where Luke stays exactly how he is and Cammy stays exactly how he is, and Cammy ends up as the number 1 character again right now?
That's possible, but I would very much heavily favor Luke over it. So yeah. Like not a highly likely, but like, yeah, that wouldn't be impossible.
And we've lived through those scenarios. We've still played the game. We've still done this and stuff. So I'm not super concerned about it, but at the same time, it is good to get out in front of this if Luke is that bad of a thing, and like, let's make sure that Capcom addresses this sooner rather than later, because if he is that dominant, if he is taking over the game and making it not fun, that ruins the game. Like, we don't want that. That's a much worse look than having a DLC character not be what they should be.
I will say that if Capcom's overall goal is just to promote Luke, there is a certain, like, as the community, we should kind of temper our approach, right? Expectations should be tempered a bit to consider that like they have more goals than just to make the game as competitively viable as possible. If their main priority is to leave Street Fighter V and get us ready for Street Fighter 6, and they want Luke to kind of be that connection for us and carry us over there, it's like, well, okay, maybe we have a little bit more patience for this kind of a thing. Maybe it's okay to a stronger degree than it would be otherwise. But if Capcom wants a fully competitive final season of Street Fighter V, they need to change Luke.